Okay, hi everyone. Thanks so much for joining me to talk about moving forward in a pandemic in K through 12 education in these really unusual times. I really appreciate you all joining me to share your perspectives. And I think that it's noteworthy that we started out with a significant delay in this presentation because of technical difficulties. I think that we're all experienced with technical difficulties these days. That seems to really guide a lot of our lives. But I really want to hear from each of you. You're all in education. You're all, I think everybody here is a teacher or a teacher's aide in some way. I think that we might end up having another person join us who's a bus driver and maybe someone else also. So I'll look forward to hearing those perspectives too. But I do want to just recognize who's here. So Dora, you're a teacher in Horseheads, right? What do you teach in Horseheads, Dora?
Hi, Leslie. Thank you so much for having this. I am a 7th grade history teacher. I'm starting my 31st year, still in 7th grade. I can't seem to get out of 7th grade. Yeah, love every minute of it.
Maybe you really like 7th grade. Maybe there's 7th grade.
Grown up.
There you go. Margaret, you're a teacher in Elmira, right? At Ernie Davis Academy.
Yes, and I started at Broadway Middle School with Dora. Dora was my mentor. And I started in 7th grade, but I went to 8th grade after a few years, 9 years, something like that. I'm in my 27th year at the Elmira City School District at Ernie Davis Academy. Loving every
What do you teach?
I teach 8th grade social studies. Mm-hmm. And, you know, honestly, I've loved where I go every day of the last 26 years. This year, I still love where I'm going, but it's very challenging to say. It kind of feels like the first year again, actually.
So I have a 6th grader and I have a 10th grader. And so my kids are bracketing what you folks are teaching. And it is complicated in our house. I know that.
Yeah.
You're a special education teacher's aide, right? A classroom aide.
Yes, I'm an assistant at Ridge Road. I've actually been 16 years at Gardner Road in Horseheads, but this year we're in a new building with a lot of new faces. So just kind of learning the faces and the ropes and all the new rules, and yeah.
Amazing. And then Adam, you're an elementary teacher and a reading specialist, right, in Ithaca?
Yeah, I'm actually a certified elementary teacher and reading teacher, and I've been in the Ithaca City School District for 18 years, and have grown up and lived here in the southern tier.
So I want to just hear from you folks. We've had a lot of challenges in the southern tier and Finger Lakes area with lack of funding for schools in general, right? I mean, I know that even before the pandemic hit, we were hearing a lot about how our schools just get shortchanged here. Dora, I know you were talking about this earlier as we were waiting for the technology to sort itself out. You know, as a middle school teacher, what are some of the challenges that you find this underfunding? How does that affect you as a teacher in your day-to-day classroom?
Well, you know, it's been so frustrating and disheartening because I feel like we've been fighting this to some extent since 2008 and maybe even before that. But, you know, in 2009 and 10, we had huge cuts to a lot of programs in Horseheads. I know a lot of schools in the area had just devastating cuts to their art program, their libraries. We were finally just getting to a point where it was a little bit better. And this is just draining. This is draining us of all of our reserves. We're spending just millions of dollars to keep our students safe, which we need to do. But with the cuts now, with, you know, the governor withholding 20%, it really puts a chokehold on myself as a teacher. Like, for example, I have a new learning management system and I have to teach my students how to use it. But because we've had to loan out all of our computers, I don't have any in the classroom. So I have to teach students in the classroom how to use it when they're home, but I don't have the computer in the classroom. So they have to watch me on my smart board to figure out how to use it. It's an insane situation. And I know the district is doing their best with what we have, but it's frustrating. It's frustrating, it's disheartening. When we need support the most, we just don't have it.
And so, okay, so take me back to like, let's say last November, before, we really saw that a pandemic was on the horizon. And Margaret, you were talking about this a little bit earlier too. And Jessica, I'm sure as a special education aide or assistant, you must experience all the time children who need additional services and have additional needs that maybe the school district can't provide because the money just isn't there. Imagine we're back in last November. What are you dealing with? What sort of challenges do you find? Jessica, I see it going across your face. What are you facing in the classroom?
I think like Dora said, the district is doing, what they can, but these cuts from at a state level are just devastating across the board. We have these, new regulations, these new safety things, and they're, exactly what need to be in place, but to put them in place and then not fund them at a state level is irresponsible.
Mm-hmm. Margaret, you're at Ernie Davis, right? Mm-hmm. And so you've got 8th graders in your classroom. Do you have enough, like Dora was talking about the computers, are your students all able to be on Chromebooks or?
No. And I'd like to kind of, like when you said, let's go back to November, I'd like to go back to January, the end of January.
Okay.
And we're going to go back to the Funding Our Future. There was that big Funding Our Future tour. They actually came to Elmira. They went to one of the elementary schools. They spent the day there. And I bring that up because at that point in January, before all this occurred, we were owed, I can't remember if it was 10 or 12 million, either way, but, in foundation funding. That was already supposed to be there, and it wasn't.
It was promised. The state had promised.
It was yeah. And now we're, not post-pandemic, mid-pandemic, however you want to say it. And now we're talking about another $14 million in cuts. For a place like Elmira, if you're aware of the, the socioeconomic nature of the city, that is a devastating blow to education in that area. And just like Jessica said, I believe that our district has done the very best with what they've been handed. They're a great team, and they've done a good job. They really have. But back to the devices, I gave you the example earlier in my first period, Group A, because we're doing the cohort A and B model. Out of 12 students, I have 3 students that have devices in class.
Wait a minute. Okay. Right now, you have 12 students in cohort A, and only 3 of them have devices.
Yep.
And we're doing remote learning.
Yep.
How does that work, Margaret?
Well,
how do you for students?
Yeah. How does it work? I go to the copy machine and I make hard copies for the kids that are there, and they work on the hard copies. We do have a smart board to take them through presentations and stuff. And then like today I had them just leave. I'm fortunate enough to be in a big, huge art room because the kids stay in one room all day long, and the teachers move from room to room.
Okay, that's how you're doing it at Ernie Davis. Okay.
Yeah, and I happen to be in this really big room with lots of countertops and stuff like that. So I said, just, you can take your papers home and finish them and then bring them back. But if you're done with them, lay them out on the counter, and I'm going to kind of spray them with disinfectant, because I guess the rule is you can hand papers out, but you can't collect them back in.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then I'll just let them sit there for 24 or 48 hours, and then I'll collect them and I'll grade them.
Whoa. Okay. So that's that's a lot.
It's a little bit primitive.
That's a lot. Okay, Adam,
Yeah.
what are teachers in Ithaca experiencing? What are you hearing?
Sure. So kind of like Margaret, I can take you back to even just the early spring, even before all of the COVID stuff, is the talks around budget. This is when local school districts were getting their initial aid runs, they call them, like they were knowing how much state aid was coming. But we knew that threat of possible reduction through that legislative process was there. So what we experienced in Ithaca in the spring was a reduction of support teachers, which kind of was we had several people. We're the largest in the southern tier area. So, with 12 buildings, we had teachers that were doing some support role work in the buildings, and they got cut. Like we knew I think even in April that those people would be going back into like their original classroom positions, but then that support for the teachers was gone. So there were cuts actually just within the formation of the regular budget. And then of course, COVID pushed, things to May and June and whatnot in terms of the budget and the vote, but there were cuts.
Adam, let me just make sure I'm catching up and understanding here. So what got cut was the support specialist. So that means that like the classroom ratios where you used to have I don't know, tell me if I've got this right. You used to have an additional support person come in and help, as needed in the classroom, and now you don't have those people anymore? Is that
it was a teacher. So a teacher might be assigned as like a support teacher for that building, and they were helping out with Chromebooks. They were helping out with integration of curriculum, inclusion models, and initiatives.
They're like a tech support person.
They were, it was like a mix of tech, curriculum standards, any type of initiative, because there's always so many initiatives being rolled out every year in education that you can't do it yourself as a teacher or SRP. So you need like people who dedicate their time and energy to just kind of help with that.
Well, I know that. I mean, I'm a lawyer, but I can't,
So we were experiencing hey, things got to start being cut from a budget back in spring. But working with, our administration, we were trying to make sure that there wasn't cuts to like classroom positions or music teachers kind of thing, that the first cut was these extra positions that were kind of then, you can go back into your spots. But those were valuable positions that helped the teachers and the students. They also worked with SRPs to get them whatever they needed, whether they were new or veteran. So we knew that there were cuts in the spring. Then of course, budgets, I think overwhelmingly, except for a small percentage, passed in New York, because that obviously happens, but that is because the communities understand the need for great public schools. So you do find that the majority of community members, voters, say they want their schools to be funded. So they pass these budgets. And as you know, sometimes they come along with like a resolution to buy a bus or to move monies. Like there's different things that voters vote on. So I think overwhelmingly, they passed across the state, which is a clear sign that people want money for their public schools. Like they'll do what they can, even if it's sometimes $1 or more a year in taxes, like they know that that's needed. But then what we experienced over the summer was this continued threat of obviously cut to state aid, and the rising cost to deal with reopening of schools with COVID. So what we were experiencing in Ithaca was the potential loss of reading teachers. So what the district was doing was saying we can absorb positions by not filling the people who resigned or retired. And we had a couple, just a coincidental year, we had like 3 reading teachers retire. So therefore, or resign. So it was like 3 positions that was currently posted to be filled. And the decision was, we're just not going to fill them because of budget. So we rallied as teachers, classroom teachers at the elementary level, reading teachers across all buildings, including the middle school, and said this is crucial for development. And if we are, at this point it was summer, if we are going to be virtual, we need reading teachers to provide digital learning to students for reading instruction, because the classroom teacher can't do those small groups or individual one-on-one we need these people. So, we were lucky enough where the administration did something within the budget and those were reinstated. But I do know of other places across the southern tier and across the state where they weren't so lucky, that they did see not only positions cut, but actual cuts, which caused people to be laid off, which is a whole nother issue. But
and when people get laid off, then that means there's fewer people in the classroom to be with the children. I mean, it ultimately ends up, if the technology person is no longer there, then, I'm thinking about in Margaret's classroom, you have 9 children who don't have devices. So you kind of need a technology person. I mean, it's gonna rebound back on the kids sooner or later.
Every cut, whether it is an SRP or a teacher, there's an impact on students somewhere, right? On paper, it might not look that way, like, oh, you just make a larger class size here, or you just don't provide this extra support. But we know that all of them are vital for our students. So that was kind of the summer. I luckily can say that, as a teacher, I'm not aware of there being cuts as of the first day of school. Which was, a couple of days ago, but we know of this 20% thing is still looming and the rising costs to reopen schools. So with the administration saying this is how much we're spending on everything from the sanitizer stations to the stand-up desks so that they take up less room, to the what's the technical name for these plastic dividers? Like there's an actual engineering name for that.
Plastic dividers.
Yeah. All of this is adding up, they're saying. So like they've shared with us that, it's X amount of thousands of dollars up to the million or whatever at this point that's coming out of the budget. So as that continues,
that costs money. All of it.
Yeah, that costs a lot of money.
Yeah. So as we're seeing cuts to, let's say, art supplies, when we see cuts to other classroom supplies, money's got to go also to ordering all of these things to reopen schools. So as teachers, we get frustrated with the cutting to budgets for classroom supplies. So then we're spending more out of our own pocket and doing the Target runs and the dollar store runs to try and buy the supplies that you had to cut from your budget. But that gets very costly, especially for like an art teacher or music teacher. You can't just pick up the 1-cent folders, back to school sale. Boxes of clay and instruments are expensive. So it's not something you can just easily do. So there's a lot of issues with not only supplies and positions, but where this is going to go in the future. So we need to make sure that there are legislators and candidates saying we need to fully fund our schools and continue to listen to how these cuts are impacting the students. I think here.
Okay. I just want to. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you, Adam. But I just want to make sure I'm getting the numbers straight here. I've spent a lot of time studying the education budget. And one of the things that I hear back from taxpayers is, we can't pay any more in taxes. So if schools want more money, we can't do that. But so, which I understand, absolutely. So I think the piece that we really need to recognize is that part of the school budget comes from property taxes, which, okay, let's be really clear, those are regressive. They hit poor people harder than they hit wealthy people. I mean, property taxes are a way to really stick it to the middle class, right? But there's also a whole section of education funding that comes from state funds that's not property taxes. And what we're discovering over time is that portion keeps getting cut. So the state funding, this is the 12 million that you were talking about, Margaret. When we calculate up in Elmira how much the state has not put in, despite their promise to put it in, it's 12 million in Elmira right now. So if we were going to make that whole, $12 million is a lot of money to wring out of property taxes in Elmira. You can't do that. So
correct.
If we're trying to raise property taxes in order to fix this gap, what we're trying to do is figure out how come the state keeps promising this aid, and actually they were required to. There was a lawsuit, right, that they were supposed to provide this aid.
I might be wrong, but I believe that one thing I heard was that the longer they hold off on it, the more interest they make off of the money that's in the bank. I mean,
well, there you go. So maybe there's a reason not to. Maybe they're making money off it, but
yeah, I think they are
to send that, and they're still not sending it. And now on top of that, we have these additional costs with I think you're right, Margaret. The technical term is plastic dividers, and everything else that we have for managing the pandemic, and then there's going to be an additional 20% cut to the state aid.
Yeah, it's going to be bad.
And then what is even more insulting is that it's not called a cut. They're just saying we're withholding this for now because we need the money to fund the state. So the students and the schools have to do with less just in case we don't have enough money for the state to reconcile their budget. And that 20% is going to be withheld. And then another 20% is going to be withheld. I mean, I think we are just seeing the beginning. This is going to get more painful. I know that I've spoken with a couple of area superintendents, including my own. And if nothing changes, then next year is going to be painful. We're going to have to make some hard decisions. I guess I would just like to say, in 2009 and 10, when we fought back all of the cuts, we said to Board of Educations throughout the area, throughout the state, these kids don't get a do-over. They're not going to get to recoup the losses from the programs that are getting cut, from losing reading teachers, from losing art and music and enrichment programs, and not having the technology they need. We're going to impact.
But if a child misses their whole 7th grade year, they miss that year. It's not like you can go back and fill that.
It's going to impact an entire generation of kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And just, what? And just besides, like, where are our priorities here? Where are our priorities
with our kids? I think we're supposed to be paying attention to, the future and our kids.
Exactly. And that's really the real question. Where are our priorities? They're letting the education system just fall by the wayside.
Yeah. And
it's been like that for a long time, Leslie.
This week, and all of you started school. You started school this week with your students in classrooms or remote. I mean, every school district has done it differently. I know in Ithaca, where my kids go to school, it's entirely remote right now. In other districts, it's a hybrid system. So everybody's got different, but you all started back with your students. What was that like? I mean, Jessica, what has it been like for you to be with your students this week?
Seeing them again has been outstanding. I mean, you don't realize how much you really kind of have that relationship building piece that is really required in a face-to-face capacity, and how much community building you do in your classroom in that face-to-face manner. And I think that's, it was, kind of said by a couple people, but I think that's what's most frustrating about these state cuts, is because we view our classroom as a community. We view our school building and our district as a community, and everybody pulls their weight. With all these new rules and trainings and regulations, SRP staff and teachers are training, custodians are, cleaning. I've been watching the bus drivers do runs for weeks now. The technology people are, bending over backwards. The facilities is working 24/7 to get, PPE out. And like Adam said, the community is, they're supporting and passing budgets, and they're recognizing the importance of our school and the importance of the safety things that are happening. The kids are coming in, they're wearing their masks, they're looking at this, okay, these are the new rules, this is what we need to do. Everyone is, moving in the same direction. And then the state's cutting. I mean, it's what you place importance on. And I think that's what's immensely frustrating is everyone has pivoted to this, you know, this is what it is now, this is what we have to do. And everyone is working in the same direction except that piece. And I think that that's what's, you know, really the most frustrating piece is we have amazing staff and our kids are amazing and our community is amazing. But again, there's only so much you can do with property taxes. Some of it does have to come from the state.
And you had, I mean, it wasn't ideal. Margaret described how it wasn't ideal in January, but you at least had a house of cards built, right? You were teetering on that house of cards. You had it kind of so it all worked.
And we were actually a little bit excited because with those, I think Adam mentioned that the aid runs, and Elmira was actually set to get a little bit more than what they expected, and it was like, oh, the joy, you know, we have we got a little bit of a buffer here, and then it just that house of cards just by March.
And no one is
which I mean, part of it is not the state's fault. I mean, who would have expected we'd be in this situation, which in my opinion we'd be out of it if there was a better national response, but that's a whole nother story for another. But check out my Facebook page. No, I'm just kidding. But it just seemed like we were kind of like on a good positive roll, and then, you know, and now not only does the foundation aid go down the drain, but then a 20% cut. That's huge for Elmira. And Elmira is not an area that can recoup. Like maybe Ithaca might. I don't think Ithaca can recoup.
Nobody in Ithaca wants to see their property taxes go up by $12 million either.
What?
I mean, it might be slightly more possible to do that in Ithaca because maybe there's some more wealth here. But let me.
That's what I meant. I didn't mean you could recoup
totally.
But I'm
get
just
it,
saying,
Margaret. I absolutely get it.
You could probably raise a little bit more revenue, a little bit easier than we could in Elmira.
I think that's true. I think that's true. And that's why we have this system that we have across the state. That's the whole point, is that it's not supposed to be just the poor districts funding schools entirely by themselves, right? That's the whole purpose of public education, is to make sure that it doesn't matter which zip code a child gets born into.
Nothing against Ithaca.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I don't know the percentage, but I've seen it before. The amount that we have of the general operating budget is percentage-wise is a lot less than Elmira, or even Cortland. Because of that wealth ratio factor, which is part of this formula that nobody really understands, but it's part of that. And that might be why we might not be in as difficult condition, or we were able to do a student one-to-one device rollout starting 3 years ago, which thank goodness that kind of happened, I guess, because otherwise they would have been scrambling to buy all these computers, you know.
Yeah, that's what we're doing, scrambling.
So there's probably definitely some truth there, but then, you know, different ways of cost. You know, when you have one of the public charter schools within your school district that has other financial implications. There's a whole nother Facebook Live with somebody on the details of how the funding works for those entities. So there's a lot that goes into this. No teacher is really ever the expert. We know exactly what is being cut. We know kind of general gist of presentations that we get, but Leslie, you're right. Like, we can speak to how we know it's impacting students. So, you know, Dora said, like, you can't get the child's year back. Well, you can't also get interventions back either. Like, if that first grader doesn't get the reading interventions they need, you're now off track for the progress that they need to make by third grade for being successful as readers and learners. So everything has an impact, and that's something that that I'm not sure people who make these decisions around less funding are being aware of. I don't know the full stories, but I mean, we often talk as teachers about the people making some of these decisions are not connected to public education, which is a whole nother thing that, you know, you kind of decide on what's going to impact public ed, but you aren't experiencing it yourself or even talking with the people. It's around money and it's around numbers. And I do, you know, think that people have figured out, school districts and teachers and SRPs have figured out how to make things work starting the first day under all these crazy conditions of distancing, masks, and hybrid plans. But I do think that talking with a lot of my colleagues, like, we don't know what mid-year is going to bring. We saw what happened in Rochester. We see what happens elsewhere when people are just caught mid-year. That's devastating to students, devastating. Can you imagine going off on winter break and coming back and your teacher completely gone? We know those things happen, and I don't think they've happened that quite drastic here in the Southern Tier, but I think there's fear that that is going to happen.
And then that has a ripple effect throughout the entire community, because those are our parents that are now out of work, because many of our school personnel and teachers live in the community. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just
devastating.
Dora, you and I caught up because we were trying to decide, whether to do this. I'm frankly pretty impressed with you folks for going through your first couple days of education in a pandemic. Well, I guess, you're old hands at this, right? You did education in a pandemic last spring, so you got it.
It's not the same.
Yeah, whatever. But anyway, you went through your first couple of days, and now here you're spending your evening chatting with me about it, which I'm enormously grateful to you for. But Dora, when you and I talked after your first day, and I asked you how the day went, it really struck me that the first thing you said is, "Oh, those kids are so sweet." You talked about how much you love being with your students. What's a cute thing that's happened out of all this? I mean, what are you seeing?
Well, you know what? I have cohort A, how Horseheads is doing it. I have half of my students yesterday and today. And I took a lot of time just kind of talking, easing in slow. And I guess, like, when you asked how it went, I just am so amazed at just the sweetness of them, and they're 7th graders. They're goofy and they're so eager to connect with you. And they're so eager to tell you. Like, I think yesterday in homeroom, because we ended the day together, and we all talked about ice cream and how much we wanted ice cream. And this morning we met the same group and we all discussed who got ice cream, what did they get, and goofy as that's our connection now. So, and I kind of went home kind of laughing, going, I really want ice cream now. And for that moment, it makes you forget, I still don't have my class list set in my, it just, that stuff faded away. And it was like, it was a reminder to me, like, this is why I do what I do.
Well, and it's a reminder to me too, that education is so much more than just teaching what's in the book, right? I mean, you're attending to your students' development of a sense of humor. You're helping them learn the finer points of ice cream. I mean, all joking aside, there's a whole lot of socialization and, mental health rewards and connection in a community and how you operate as a member of a community. All those lessons come through our school system. It's so much more than just learning in books.
And that's what frightens me, I guess, the most with a lot of these cutbacks. Like, I could do without computers. I don't want to, but the mental health supports that were not sufficient before the pandemic, we can't lose that. Students need these supports. They depend on them. The families depend on them. Yep. And these are challenging times. Like, if
you're on the front lines of managing mental, Jessica, I see you're wanting to say something here. I mean, if you folks are usually, you're the people that I imagine see it first when there's a mental health challenge for one of your students.
Yeah, and you don't want to see, districts make strides to add personnel and add supports and add And when these cuts happen, you don't want to see us lose those gains that we've made. I mean, those are important. Like the students were so eager and so excited to be back, and but also nervous. I mean, there was jitters, there was nerves, and they really look to those staff members, to those to the teachers, to the SRPs, to the social workers, to kind of say this is going to be okay. We've got
Mm-hmm.
this, and to not have those supports there would be awful.
Margaret, what are you thinking there?
I was well, I don't teach the full day because I do the union stuff, but but I was just thinking back on during the pandemic, and I have I get a little bit political or this or that on Facebook, and I have some friends that don't exactly agree with me, and they were just like, I don't know, they were just kind of like, oh, you teachers, you need to get back in the building, and that kind of attitude, and I thought back about during the pandemic, my members of the union, the teachers, and the SRPs and everybody else, every Friday we organized and we gathered and we delivered meals all over the city of Elmira to kids in need, to families in need, so that they would have something during the weekend.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you do that just on your own initiative?
Yep. The district mentioned something to me about it, the supervisor of student services, and I said, I will rally the troops and we will be there. And every Friday from 10 to 12, we picked up at Elmira High School, and we had our routes, and everybody spread out and they delivered stuff to homes. And so I don't know, that's back then. I mean, during when we were shut down and stuff, but that's just an example of how we feel about this community.
Well, and it's also an indication of how many children come from families that don't know if they're going to be able to have enough to eat through the weekend.
Yep, we had approximately 30. We'd have 30 to 32 routes with anywhere from 8 to 10 stops on each route. So,
and where did the food come from? Was that
it came from the county food pantry.
Okay.
And donations. So it's actually kind of interesting because towards the end of the school year, the district said, well, we don't know if we can do the Friday distribution because the food pantry is getting really low. And they also did one during the week where they delivered enough for like 4 meals, where we did enough for 2 meals. So I not convinced, didn't take much convincing. I went back to my union and I said, we need to donate to the food pantry. So the Elmira Teachers Association donated to the Chemung County Food Pantry so they could have more stuff. Because they're really good at buying in bulk, and that they could do more with what we gave them than what we could if we just donated stuff. So we gave money. So there's your teachers who don't want to go back to work and don't, that just want to sit home.
Well, Margaret, I mean, that's phenomenal. And it also is a real indication of a
dedication.
I mean, you came up with a real bandage over a pretty gaping wound there. But if we look at that and we see, okay, first of all, we have these families in Elmira who don't have enough to eat. And the school district normally would provide a Friday distribution to those children, but then the reserves of the school district are going down. So then you go to the food pantry, and the food pantry's reserves are going down. So then you go to the teachers union. The teachers union makes a donation to the food pantry so they can get the money to send the food to the students. I mean, that is really a community taking care of its own, but it's also a real indication that
a community in need
funding this.
Yeah.
The one thing, if I can share, I can piggyback on that a little bit. I think we did the same thing in Ithaca when the Southern Tier Food Bank stopped their distribution site in Ithaca due to COVID. We did find out that there was a local organization that was still distributing out of a food pantry, and of course their requirements for how they were going to do this, reached a all-time high of, how do we get this done without many people together with all of the different layers of protection and so forth. But we had members of our teachers union as well gather, and we are still doing that, because the one thing that I think that the spring illustrated so clearly was that public schools are not just for the education. Everything is kind of centered around them: the breakfast programs, the lunch programs, the backpack programs for weekend food, the extended day programs that are offered by public school districts, and then the wraparound programs that aren't even school district related, but they use the facilities. So a lot of community councils or other agencies, run the after school programs for kids, but they need to be in the schools. So when schools are shut down, they really can't operate, because that's where they operate out of. So everything kind of tumbled in terms of childcare, especially as essential workers were still working. And now under phase 4, most people are working. There's, I don't know the exact numbers. It would be great to actually, if we could find out what is the number of public school families that can't work remotely. So that's a large issue around reopening, is that people need schools open because there's not enough daycare slots. There's not enough childcare slots before and after school. People are scrambling with these hybrid plans. The hybrid plans are a must for safety of staff and students, but they are causing a problem for parents in what they're doing. Where do you send your kid for 2 to 3 days while you have to go to work? Not everybody is utilizing those COVID entitlements, and they don't extend all that long, if I'm correct, and there's actually an end to those. So I was actually reviewing that COVID entitlement the other day, and I believe that for the childcare one, you can use it intermittently, but I think it's only 2/3 pay.
Yeah, so you're correct on it, Adam. Right? I was just reading over it today. Yeah.
So we do have a community issue where that's why there's also the push for reopening, which has been both a financial issue and now what do we do with our kids? So there's a lot kind of colliding here, but what I think COVID showed was that how essential it is for the community, not just for the students in the classroom and the typical reading, writing, and arithmetic, but the actual full services that public schools are doing, what the social workers do, what the nurses do. That was all shut down. And so we were all still trying to do that work. And nurses were connecting with families, social workers were connecting with families all through March, April, May, and they actually stayed connected in various ways over the summer. And here we are with, sometimes they're back, sometimes they're not. But that is why the funding for the public schools is so important, is because people utilize it as a way that they live.
We are the nucleus.
Go ahead, Margaret.
I said we are the nucleus.
You're the nucleus. So, okay, so I was just writing down as you were talking there, Adam. Okay, so schools are education. They are also childcare. They are also providing food, which is pretty basic human need. They're also the first line of mental health, care for a whole lot of children. They are, as you're describing, Adam, they're a community hub, but not just in a social way. They provide the framework that allows people to work, right? They are an economic development tool that allows parents to go to work. So they're doing all of these jobs. They're not just doing education. They're also providing food. They're also providing mental health. And it's hard. You pull that scaffolding out, and of course a community is going to just flail, trying to figure out how to continue to function without that framework that we have built our entire structure around.
So why are we always the first ones to get cut?
I think it's because we don't recognize that or prioritize that. I think as a society, we look at schools and we think reading, writing, and arithmetic, that's what schools do. And actually schools Adam, you put it really well. Schools provide the framework that allow the whole rest of society to function.
Yeah.
That's why there was such a big push to reopen.
That's why there's such a big push to reopen.
Sometimes even in spite of health precautions.
Yeah.
And good point, Dora.
I mean, right? Wouldn't you probably prefer to be teaching your students completely in person? I mean, all things.
Oh my God, yeah.
Every teacher would. And the sad thing is that there are many teachers that are working right now. I mean, even before the pandemic, we talked about a looming teacher shortage. In my district alone, many teachers are above 50. I'm above 50, and it puts us at a greater risk. We're coming in. I know that we have teachers with pre-existing conditions that worry about their own health coming in to teach during a pandemic. We have staff that have children that are immunocompromised. So the concern about their own safety is stress inducing. But nobody wants to be doing it this way.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be doing it this way, especially with such tremendously scarce resources that already weren't enough.
Right.
To be this social framework. And now it's a pandemic management on top of that.
Well, here's an anecdote I just would like to share, and then I'll be done. I got an email the other day that was soliciting my interest in starting. They knew I was a teacher. They're like, start a GoFundMe page. This is a way for teachers to materials. And it was this whole email with basically showing me how to start a GoFundMe page so that my students can get the materials they want. And I know there's a lovely, lovely event in Elmira last weekend where they did a car wash and they washed cars for $5 so that they could buy school supplies. And I was so moved by it, but I was also just so angered by it. I'm like, this wouldn't happen. If we fully funded our schools, we wouldn't have to be out there washing cars. When was the last time, the state legislature had to have a bake sale so that they could do their budget? I'm sorry.
I think it's a good point, Dora. I mean, you can really see a community's priorities when you take a look at it. And when you see that every single year, it's apparently important enough to say we're going to send the money to schools, right? Apparently, there's enough social pressure to pretend we're going to fund schools. Single year, it gets pulled back. That is an indication of the priorities.
If you go to donorschoose.org, you will be surprised at the funding request just to have like a supply, just for something. I went to it the other day and I was saddened to see how many teachers are spending all of this time and energy to create these pages and promote them to just get enough money to create a virtual classroom behind them right here in their dining room, because that in itself takes funding, and they needed it, because this world of needing a document camera next to you or split screens so that you can do all these things, they weren't in place. And there was no like, oh, hey, let's do a quick order for everybody to get 2 screens. Let's do a quick order for a document camera. Let's do a quick order for a smaller easel so that it's seen within the camera. So people are doing the Donors Choose, the GoFundMe pages, and that's a clear sign that it's not the occasional big project that somebody's looking to fund. It's the little things that there is not enough money for. So either teachers are spending out of their own pocket, which we all do, or they're making these GoFundMe and Donors Choose pages. You can give to them. You can give $1. You can do whatever. But I've done them before. They take a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to get a few little supplies. You have to make the page, you have to promote the page, you have to do what you have to do while it's up. And then afterwards, you have to go through the thank you process, or else you're not eligible to do it again. So it takes work it just gets those few things. But yeah, I saw a number of my colleagues making them, and I thought, oh my goodness. So I went to the page, and there's tons. And it's encouraging because it proves how dedicated teachers are to do this for their students, but it's also very sad that that's the route that we have to go.
Well, and here's another piece. It also shows the community support, right? Because people are donating to those. So that means that people want their dollars to go to education. It just isn't happening through the structure that we're supposed to send it through. And that's really inefficient, right? I mean, that's just really not how the structure is supposed to work. Okay, so we have just a couple of minutes left. We started late, so we're going to go ahead and end late. But I want to just give each of you a chance to share. What are you looking forward to? What do you think? I mean, I hear how much each of you care about your students. What do you think is going to be a positive that'll come out of this, and what are you looking forward to in this school year?
I just want all my kids back in my room, and I want it to just be, normal again. I miss the old days, I guess.
You miss having all your students there with you, and yeah.
Well, I want all my students there with me, but I also want people to recognize, or not people, the government to recognize that, we provide a valuable service in our society, and help us out.
Yeah,
please.
What
don't just leave us by the wayside. What?
I was going to ask Jessica what it looked like she was there.
I think, like I said before, just rebuilding that sense of community in our classroom. It's really, I mean, Zoom meetings are great. I mean, they're necessary in certain situations, but there's just something about those face-to-face conversations with kids. I mean, and you're right. We do have the community support, and these are our kids. I mean, they become our kids over the course of the year. I mean, they come in, when their fish is sick, you know those little things about them, and those are hard connections to make through a computer screen. And I think just having them back in person, and really just having that increased sense of community in the building, because everyone is all hands on deck working, and I feel like we're all moving in that direction. So to not have that state support is just, again, frustrating. But I those face-to-face conversations are just vital.
You're looking forward to face-to-face with your students.
I am. Yeah, absolutely.
Adam, what are you looking forward to? What?
Yeah, I'll answer that in 2 parts as well. If you kind of just focus on where we are in the reality right now with COVID and in the way that we're reopening to be safe, I've been saying to local media and everybody who's interviewed me on, what it's like under these conditions. And, I've said, this is teachers' skill. Their craft is working one-to-one with students. We know the majority of teachers don't want to be online teachers. If they did, they would be working for some online school program that already exists out there. They don't. They work for a public school district. That's what they want. And that's what we want to do, is that skill and that craft. We want to make sure that there's hashtag not until it's safe, because that's what we've been promoting, is that it needs to be safe for the staff and students. But, getting to a point where, COVID is either reduced or to some level not as spreadable, that's the goal. And I think that people are hopeful, and myself, that we can get there. Is it going to be in the next few weeks? Probably not, but hopefully we won't be living this for the whole school year, but who knows? And then on the other end, when it comes to the budget and all that, kind of like I spoke about a few minutes ago, that this kind of shutdown stuff really highlighted how important public schools are. And I thank you for doing this type of event, because I think sometimes as busy parents, busy residents with or without kids who support public schools, they don't really know kind of what's happening with this stuff. So they pay their school taxes, they see the school buses, they see some headlines, they read their newsletters that come in the mail. But it's events like this that I think will help spread the word, so that legislative actions and things like that can happen, so that legislators know that their constituency is, hey, you need to support our schools. And I'm hoping that there'll be more of that. Now that people are realizing just how crucial the schools are. The one thing that I also noticed from March, even through this week, is that if you do catch glimpses of Good Morning America or the nightly news or the Jimmy Kimmel show or whatever these things are, these kind of like quasi celebrities, right? News anchors and stuff, you know, they're celebrities in their own, like they've been very outgoing about this too, and saying, thank you, teachers. Like, I can't teach my 7-year-old. I can't teach my 16-year-old. Like, we need you. And that's one thing that I think was good about this, this whole time, is like, there's that public address of just how crucial schools are, regardless of where you live.
Gosh, that's sure true. I know that, I'm 46 years old. I still remember Mrs. Schetzel, who taught me how to read when I was in first grade. And, it was like a whole world opened up. All of a sudden, all these little marks on the page, I remember that feeling. All of a sudden, Mrs. Schetzel opened that up for me, and then I could read. And then Ms. Marsh, who was my senior year of high school, she was my English teacher. She opened my mind up to a whole other way of reading where, I really was able to immerse myself in the literature and learn so much. So, I think all of us as adults, we think back to those teachers who made such an impression on us. And those are very formative experiences. Dora, what are you looking forward to? Are you looking ahead to anything that's going to...
I think that, it's the history teacher in me. I'm looking forward to looking back. I'm looking forward to looking back on this one day and, reminiscing. I was telling my students that this today, because we were talking about what history is. And I'm like, one day you're going to tell little kids about going to school during the pandemic and how you had to wear a mask. And when I was talking to them that way, I kind of got excited, like maybe it's gonna end one day. So I look forward to that. I look forward to looking back and getting through it and learning from it, learning, what we can do better. I look forward to, and I'm not even a big physical hug, but I look forward to just hugging somebody, and having that warmth that everybody I think is craving right now, and feeling some of the anxiety ease away when that happens.
Well, I think we can get a lot of this back. I think we just have to prioritize it as a community, as a state. We have to prioritize that, we're going to invest in getting that back for ourselves. We're going to invest in this scaffolding that makes our economy possible, because there's childcare and there's education and there's mental health care and there's food and there's all these things that we are getting out of a school system. I think we're going to get that back. But I think we have to come together to do it. And I really appreciate each one of you taking the time this evening to share your stories, because as Adam said, I think that does allow folks out in the community who are understandably wrapped up in their own experience of this pandemic and how it's affecting their own lives, helps people understand, how much we need to come together as a community and to prioritize this so we can have that scaffolding back for ourselves. Well, listen, I really appreciate each one of you taking the time. Dora, Jessica, Adam, Margaret, you folks you're doing heroes work out there, taking care of our kids and taking care of our future. And I'm tremendously grateful to each one of you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and
thank you.
It means a lot to have somebody want to hear what we have to say.
Yeah,
that's priceless. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad to listen anytime. Go ahead and take it back to all of your compadres, your fellow bus drivers, your everybody out there, and let them know how how enthusiastic we are about the real yeoman's work that everybody's doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you.